I'm sure you've been asked this before, husband and wife working together. So your husband and wife and your colleagues too. So everybody here is in an organization, they're used to performance reviews. So I am going to ask you to performance review him, a very mini one. One strength, one area which is done well, and one areas for improvement or not.
Okay, one huge area of strength I'd say about Bill is unbelievable curiosity. Curiosity for no matter what the topic is. And, but it's so interesting, his curiosity is so focused on doing the right thing for the poor. So he was learning a whole set around climate issues at one point a few years ago, still is. And one of my friends was in that meeting, and she said, she told me afterwards, like a month later, she goes, you know, she said, the thing that was so interesting, Melinda, was Bill was asking all these questions from these experts about climate, blah, 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 and finally he stopped them and said, but you don't get it. The reason I'm asking is I'm asking on behalf of the poor. And they assumed his motivation was all just about learning, but it's learning on behalf of the community that we're serving. So that unbelievable curiosity, I think, stimulates all of us at the foundation. The one area for improvement I would just say is Bill's also very tough on himself. Is that fair? Very tough on himself, and sometimes he can be tough on other people. Not tough on their personality, but tough on, do you really know? So if you were here presenting the results of Avahan, he's going to go through all the results with you, and if you really don't know them, he's going to be tough on you. And that was true at Microsoft too, but that's also what makes progress. But his toughness is also toughness on himself.
Well, Melinda's great about the people dynamics, both inside the foundation, how we get people enthused, and how the processes we're using and the various personalities are coming together to let people do their best work. And that's something, she'll often look at choices we have through that lens and find allies inside the foundation who can help her improve those things. And partly because, I know that's important, but I don't get as much time on it. It makes a huge difference to have us always thinking about that and being part of how we make decisions. In terms of negatives, she doesn't like long memos. Sometimes I say, write whatever you need to write about that topic. And if it's a meeting that Melinda's in, she'll be like, no, don't write everything.
Because they send us binders of information. Like you get a 50-page memo.
He's giving the feedback.
Sorry.
Bill, in one of your earlier interviews I saw, someone asked you to make a pitch for giving, and you said it very simply. You said, you can't take it away. It's not good for your kids, so might as well give it away to wealthy people to give away their wealth. And I loved the way you had put it. But there's a saying in India, I don't know if you were aware of this, but there's a saying in India, make so much that 7 generations don't have to work. You remember that? 7 janmo tak. So that's the Indian way of parenting. I mean, I will leave so much for my kids that they, not only them, but 7 subsequent generations, and you can multiply how many people, that is 2 to the power of 7 or whatever, will not have to work. And you said it's not good to give your kids so much money. And I agree with you, but how will you elaborate on that, I guess?
Well, I think a first-generation fortune is where the attitude gets decided. And all over the world, there's lots of people with first-generation fortunes who decide that. I think that's increasing over time, and it's a good thing. Once a fortune's being passed down in a dynastic way, then it's a little hard to stop, because it's like, well, Dad gave it to me. Who am I to stop this pass along type approach? And the right level of what you give to your kids, that's an interesting discussion. But the basic idea that society's resources should be through just the luck of the womb, Warren Buffett has said that's like, that our Olympic team, well, maybe that's a bad analogy, Olympic team should be, picked as the grandchildren of the Olympic team from 60 years ago. You just wouldn't do it that way. And yet, in terms of wealth and deciding how wealth gets allocated, there's a little bit of that goes on. And so some societies adopt estate taxes that encourage people to be philanthropic because they make that a special case. And I think the trend will be in favor of more philanthropy, even in cases where the fortune's been passed along.
There's also an amazing sense of empowerment if you can earn your own money. I mean, we both grew up in very middle-class families, and to know that you can earn your own money, I mean, for me in my 20s, to know I could sustain myself and actually sustain a family, whether I married Bill or somebody else, that's an amazing feeling. And you know, I think if you get this wealth that keeps getting passed down, I went to school with some kids who, you know, the wealth had been passed down 3-4 generations. There's a sense of entitlement that comes with them and an attitude that I don't really think you want permeating your society.
Melinda, I want to ask you this. As an American woman, you know, you come from a country where, you know, women's rights are relatively high compared to other nations, especially this part of the world. Now, let's say a hypothetical scenario, you're in India somewhere and you're doing something what the foundation is doing, helping maybe a program on sanitation or whatever, and you see a very patriarchal society. You see a husband who's not treating his wife nicely and treating her in a way which will just not fly in the US. While you are there to maybe work on within the mandate, does the feminist in you or does the woman in you sometimes want to scream out loud, hey, what are you doing? Or why is this society like this? Why are girls being treated this way? And of course, you may not be able to do it, but do you feel that inside sometimes that, what is this? I mean.
Well, I think I feel that sense of outrage almost any time and in any country, including my own, when you see men not treating women very well. And you do see it in the US. I think women are pretty far along in the US, but quite frankly, I think they could go. We still have a ways to go in the United States. And this is a question that's really got me thinking as I would be traveling back from a place like Africa or Bangladesh and India, and I'd look at women's rights in those countries and say, wow, they're not far enough along. And then I had to ask myself the same question in the United States. So I certainly I get very outraged if there's violence, domestic violence against women. But I use that outrage to say, what else do we need to learn about our work? What is it about the culture? What's holding that woman in check? And how do we empower her? And how do we give her agency? And in different countries, there are different social structures around her, and you need to break those down. So for instance, Niger, if we're going after family planning there, the place we're starting is with a husband's school. We're going to teach the husbands first about family planning, get them bought in, then we can reach the women. Here in India, the self-help groups, you have to have the mother-in-law as part of the conversation. When she starts to see child mortality going down in her village because of new practices that are being introduced, and the mother-in-law accepts those practices, then she will allow her daughter-in-law to do the right things. But you've got to educate them together and then also bring the husband along. And so I take any time I get outraged, which I definitely get outraged, I think about, okay, what's the flip side of it? How can I use that outrage to learn something that might help us in our work?
Yeah, okay. Actually, interesting you mentioned family planning, because I think, Bill, one of your initiatives is to make a more pleasurable condom, which I thought is a fascinating insight, and it's one of those nudge, nudge, wink, wink topics, but it is at the heart of it, because people don't like using condoms. People say it's like running on the beach with socks on or something like that. So how does that thinking generate? Did you get that inputs from people? How did you, and how's that going actually?
You know, maybe 20 years ago, people wouldn't even, been willing to talk about it as much. There is some technology materials that might be able to maintain a barrier with a very, very thin material. And so I think in the next year we'll see if it looks good enough that there's a next generation of funding that happens there. With a lot of our innovations, there could be a market for it in countries that are well off, that then all the volume and the R&D could be funded there. In this case, I would think that might be the case. Some things we do, like say malaria prevention or TB, it's not in the rich world, and so we're the only way that the risky R&D is going to get done. But I'd say there's at least a 50% chance we'll have a new generation. In fact, the only real question at this point is, can it be made inexpensively? And time is on our side, making that possible.
But I think one of the great things, I mean, again, investing in family planning, there's huge unmet need for family planning in India. 43 million couples tell us they want to have more family planning tools. We need to give them more choices. And if you're in an urban area like Delhi, it's pretty easy. If you're in the rural area, it's not very easy today. And so women, there's very high awareness, but not much supply.
The product, yeah.
I think besides the condom, I mean, we're also investing in technologies for women, which hasn't been done in over a decade. One of the ones that's long on the horizon, but you know the little mints that you put under your tongue today that dissolve, it's just a little Listerine mint. Well, eventually there's probably a tool that you could use through nanotechnology. The woman could insert something like that in her vagina. Her partner or mother-in-law, nobody would know she used it, and that could have family planning built into it. That, to me, is a real innovation when you put the power in the hands of the woman.
Yeah. Bill, a personal question. I mean, you've kind of seen it all in life. You know, made wealth, gave it away. Do you ever feel like lonely compared to the rest of the world as an individual, or a sense of done it all, or bored, like, okay, what is the world fussing about? And do you have low periods or depression periods, or is it always the upbeat Bill giving away things? And, you know, how do you, as a personal, what's your mind space like?
Well, I'm very optimistic and very impatient about our work. I'm getting to learn new things, and we're achieving new frontiers. You know, understanding how the immune system works, and therefore, how can we design a vaccine to prevent HIV? You know, understanding tuberculosis, a disease that's been around for literally thousands of years, and yet there's basic things about it we're still learning to figure out how do we stop that disease, either through drugs or a vaccine. And so I don't feel any end of fascination with things that, hey, if I got the right people and studied it the right way, we'd be able to come up with a solution to this thing. And I've been rewarded enough in terms of things I was stubborn about working on, even things that appeared difficult enough that most of the world thought they were unsolvable, that, you know, I am undaunted. I have a certain self-confidence that the right group can be assembled, whether it's polio eradication or malaria eradication, or, you know, getting childhood deaths down to be less than a third of what they are today, building this new toilet that does it all without any water having to go.
I heard there's microwave involved in that.
There's many techniques. Some are chemical techniques. Basically, you know, in the case of sanitation, there's only two things you have to get rid of. You have to get rid of the smell, and you have to get rid of the disease causation. Otherwise, it's just like garbage. Those are the two things that make it really unique. And we deal fine with garbage, and, you know, the scale and mass of this, if it was just garbage-like, is very, very simple. And so we have a lot of techniques, including, you know, burning it or packaging it anyway, that we're asking that be made cheap enough that anywhere in India it could be affordable. And it may come out first as a community design for, say, 100 people, and only over time come down to the individual household, which is where we want to go. So things like that, you know, I know they're solvable, you know, 30, 40, 50 years to get these things done. So I want to, you know, move as quickly as I can, get as much done. So no, I don't really ever feel totally discouraged. The general trend is quite positive despite bureaucracy and some setbacks.
When we were dating, and Bill absolutely loved his job at Microsoft, but one of the things he would say sometimes is, you know, I wish I had more time to meet with scientists. Like, there were just so many broad areas he was interested in and reading about. And today, I mean, as you heard, just on the toilets, he gets to spend a lot of time with scientists, and that certainly seems to fuel him.
His dream job.